let me remind everyone that I publicly opposed that opposition to the movie industry. Because as an economist, I know that building Kannywood is one of the major strategies that would have led to the growth of the economy of Kano. We already had a comparative advantage. An industry that would have created jobs. We already have a youthful population that is being imaginative, that's producing good movie ideas that are popular. We're producing actors and actresses, costume designers, photographers, and that entire industry is now being moved to Kaduna. I'm sad that Kano has lost it. I'm happy that Kaduna is getting it. But this brings me to the next level of discourse at the subnational, which is northern Nigeria, because we need to understand the root of the problems of northern Nigeria. Kannywood is one example. Many years ago, maybe a decade, a little more than a decade ago, in Kano, a state governor who was a university graduate, who was a teacher, organized a public event at which books written by northern Nigerian authors were burnt. We set fire to books. You know, the kind of thing the medieval church used to do in the Dark Ages, burning books of science. It happened in Kano. Burning books. What is the crime of those books? They're writing about something called soyayya. And love apparently is supposed to be a very bad word. In a society where you don't love your woman and you don't love your children, you allow them to beg, you beat up your woman, why should anyone talk about love? Why? Because we have adopted an interpretation of our culture and our religion that is rooted in a 13th century mindset that refuses to recognize that the rest of the Muslim world has moved on. Today in Malaysia, you wake up and divorce your wife, that's fine. But you give her 50% of all the wealth you acquired since you married her. It's a Muslim country. In Nigeria, you wake up after 20 years of marriage, you say to your wife, I divorce you, and that's it. Other Muslim nations have pushed forward girl-child education. They've pushed forward science and technology. They've pushed forward the arts. And you know, we have this myth in northern Nigeria where we try to create an Islamic society that never existed. You tell me that we should not write books on love in northern Nigeria? I don't know how many of you have read 1001 Nights? Have you heard of it? 1001 Nights, a book of Arabic love and erotica. That entire story was around the palace of the Caliph Harun Rashid, an Abbasid Caliph. The scholars that lived in the Abbasid period that we are quoting, the great scholars were alive when 1001 Nights was written. We are fighting culture, we are fighting civilization. Now, this is the context that Kaduna State finds itself in, where the greatest challenges we have are: one, we must wage an intellectual war, because Islam is not univocal. There are many voices. There are many interpretations. There are many viewpoints. And we have for too long allowed the most conservative viewpoint to be in ascendancy. And the consequences of that is that there are certain social problems. In 1960, land per rural hectare in Nigeria, per rural dweller in Nigeria was 2.0 hectares. Today, it is 0.9 hectares. In a decade, it will be 0.5 hectares. Some of this has been environmental, desertification, desalination. Some of it has been huge demographic explosion, and we do not want to address it. The age at which girls get taken out of school and married, the number of children that they have, having babies every year, the number of wives that people marry when they cannot maintain them and their children. These subjects have been taboo, but we cannot fix the North and get investment into the North until we confront these subjects. What is our attitude towards educating our girls? What is our attitude towards child spacing so that we can financially maintain and educate and bring up children? What is the purpose of a large population that is not educated, that is jobless, that is unemployed? Of what benefit is it to the North to have 3 million children out of school, roaming the streets begging? I can't conceivably think of any benefit to us as human beings, or as Nigerians, or as Northerners, or as Muslims, of having this army of unemployed beggars. And the system cannot cope. You have 250,000 out of school children today. You build the schools. By the time those schools are built, you have 500,000 waiting on the doors. So there has been, for me, in northern Nigeria, a complete failure of social policy. And for us to address social policy, we have to reclaim our religion. We have to look at what our religion actually says as opposed to what culture says. And we have to have the courage to go through the path that all societies went through, which is to stand up and challenge intellectually worldviews. I mean, some of the examples are horrendous. I'm sorry, but a current issue yesterday, if it is true, what I read, 200 people die of meningitis in a state. The governor was asked, and he said, it is God's curse on us for the sins. For the sin of fornication, which apparently does not happen in America, which is why they don't have meningitis. I mean, look, how have we reduced ourselves? What have we done as a people that we have placed ourselves in this situation where simple things, it's a medical issue. You don't have vaccines, go and find vaccines. Treat those who have caught it. Don't give these kinds of explanations. But this is the mindset. And I have a degree in Islamic law, and I can tell you that that is not an Islamically correct statement to make. But these are the kinds of things that we have. And I think when we talk about a difficult environment, we'll realize that 90% of that difficulty we can address because it's self-inflicted. So how do we attract investment in this environment? Because remember that people still invest in Afghanistan. They invest in Russia, they invest in Iraq. Those environments are not necessarily better or less corrupt or safer than our environment. I think summits such as this are a beginning. I think this attitude that Governor El-Rufai has taken, where he appoints himself the Chief Marketing Officer for Kaduna State, has to continue. Because I spent many years as a banker.